Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a great believer that we can learn from history, even ancient history, and the ancient Roman historian Tacitus said, "Truth is confirmed by inspection and delay, falsehood by haste and uncertainty." This is a prime example of exactly what that ancient man was talking about. This is a very complicated piece of legislation. It has enormous ramifications. In fact, I would go so far as to say it may be the most important bill any of us will ever vote on, because it will affect every American, every business, and the entire United States economy for probably the next 20 to 30 years. To me, that means that we should take the utmost care in what we're doing, that we have a responsibility, because the stakes are high, to make the process have a high standard, so that we understand the implications, so that we understand the impacts, so that we fully can appreciate how this will affect Americans for the next 2 generations. Instead, where we have the highest possible stakes, we've had the worst possible process. In my experience in public life, I have never, ever seen a process like this, where you've got an incredibly complicated and important piece of legislation with 0 hearings, 0 input from citizens, 0 input from experts. This has been done in a matter of weeks. When this process was undertaken in 1986, which, by the way, was a bipartisan process involving Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, as I recall, I think that process took something like 14 months and involved hundreds of hours of hearings, debate, discussion, and I think that bill got something like 90 votes in the Senate. That's the way this should be done. And I think the main point I want to make is we could do it that way again. I don't understand why we had to do it in this very rushed way, where many members of this side, I stood on a platform with 17 of them this morning, are willing and able and, in fact, anxious to discuss tax reform. I think corporate tax rates should be cut. I think we need to do something about offshore profits. I think we need to do something to make our economy more competitive. But I would point out, by the way, that 2/3 of the American economy is driven by consumer spending. So that tells me that we should be focusing the cuts on those people who do that spending, and that is the middle class. But in any case, we could get 70 votes or 80 votes for a tax reform proposal that was less damaging to the deficit, more stimulative to the economy, and more fairly distributed. It doesn't have to be this way. And as my colleague Senator Kaine pointed out this morning, the Republican members can test us on this proposition by taking a deep breath, postponing the vote this week, and trying to work something out on a bipartisan basis. If it doesn't work, this process, such as it is, can be resurrected, and you can have your party line vote in late January or early February, but we're racing to meet an arbitrary deadline that has no real meaning in terms of the impact of the law, when we could take some time and improve the bill. Now, we might not be able to reach some kind of consensus of 70 or 80 or 90 votes, but it seems to me we owe the American people the opportunity to try that. And then we will have, I think, almost certainly a better bill. And if I were on your side, I'd be very nervous about voting for this bill, because I think it's full of traps. I think it's full of items that are going to come back in the light of day, and people are going to say, why did you do this? What was the purpose? The House bill, for example, eliminates a deduction for teachers to buy school supplies for their students. And there may be, and I suspect there are, similar kinds of, as I say, traps in this bill that we're rushing through today. There is really no reason it has to be this way. I also am concerned about the deficit. And I've been concerned about it for some time. And it bothers me that those who have been most concerned about it suddenly don't seem to think it's a problem. I predict that it will be a problem within 4 to 5 years, particularly if interest rates starts to rise, and then we're in real trouble. If interest rates return to their normal level of 5, 5.5, or 6%, the interest on the federal deficit is very easy to calculate. $20 trillion times 1% is $100 billion a year. 5.5%, $1.1 trillion a year just in interest. That number should ring a bell with everyone around this table. That's the size of the entire current federal discretionary budget. Defense, non-defense, everything else. If we have to spend that much on interest, which is entirely, I wouldn't say possible, I'd say it's likely, we're going to be in a real fiscal crisis in this country, and we're not going to be able to do our national security that we want, and we're not going to be able to take care of the needs of our citizens. So again, my plea is there's no reason this has to be done in the next 3 days. Let's slow down, have a real process, get the input of people all across the country, find out what this bill would actually do, change it, improve it, and then come out with a product that can be passed on a bipartisan basis, will be much more consistent with the needs and desires of the American people, and will make, I believe, a difference for the next generation. Instead of being a millstone, it will be an opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.